just when I was out. They pulled me right back in because there was no way I was going to be excited for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes after I didn't really love War for the Planet of the Apes. But guys, color me surprised because we got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of good things to talk about too. So let's get into it. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into all of my thoughts on Kingdom of the War of the Dawn of the Rise of the Planet of the Apes. No, I'm kidding. It's just called Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. A huge thank you to 20th Century Studios for giving me the chance to watch this not just in any movie theater, but in a Dolby theater. And it makes a huge difference because the sound design in this movie is awesome, and the score is pretty great too. But we're going to get into all of that and some of my negatives because while I'm walking out of this movie with a smile, I didn't love it. But I'll tell you why. So before we get into it, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and get loud in the comments, guys. And let me know which Planet of the Apes movie is your favorite, all the way back from Rise of the Planet of the Apes to, yeah, that's the first one, and all the way to this one. And if this one ends up being your favorite so far, that's great too, because there's a lot to love. But in case you don't know much about the film, let's get into it right now. The film is directed by Wes Ball from the Maze Runner trilogy, and it's written by Josh Friedman, who wrote Avatar: The Way of Water, and will be writing the MCU's Fantastic Four film. Now, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes stars a lot of mocap actors, of course, and some human faces, like Freya Allan, who plays May, and then we have Kevin Durand, who plays Proximus Caesar, we have William H. Macy as another human, but then we also have Owen Teague, who plays Noah, right alongside Peter Macon, who plays Raka. Now, the one thing you could always count on in these Planet of the Apes movies is incredible mocap work by these actors and VFX specialists. I mean, it's just a breathtaking experience. But what is this entry going to do to push the franchise forward? Well, without spoiling, here's a little summary. 300 years after the reign of Caesar, a young ape goes on a journey that will lead him to question everything he's been taught about the past, and he'll have to make choices that will define the future for apes and humans alike. Now, if you forgot, Caesar is the main protagonist in the original trilogy, and this franchise or this continuity, because there are different Planet of the Apes movies, of course, the classics, and we have now these new ones. And Caesar, I mean, spoiler alert, I hate to say it, guys, but that man's dead. All right, it's been 300 years, he ain't living no more. So there's a new ape clan in town, the Eagle clan, and it's of course led by Noah and his family and friends. So it's really cool to see how this is all developing generations after Caesar's reign. So you got, of course, your protagonist and your antagonist like Proximus Caesar. So guys, again, I'm going to start off on an optimistic note because there was no reality, at least I thought, that I would come out of this movie enjoying it. I definitely thought that this was maybe a little bit of overkill, a brand new Apes franchise again. But you know what? There's some stuff to chew on in this movie. So let's start at the top with the fact that I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Wes Ball made his imprint on this movie, and it's his best film yet. He's known for the Maze Runner trilogy, and I've seen the first two Maze Runner films, and I didn't bother with the third because I'm going to be honest, it's not my favorite trilogy in the world, and I didn't think that he was a good fit for this film. Now, I will say, I went in open-minded and came out pleasantly surprised. There's a great deal of balance in the first and third acts of this movie. I love the fact that you could tell he's building a new world, but it's already been established to some degree. There's a foundation there, but it's time for him to make his own mark in the playground, and he did it, bro. Like, he absolutely knocked it out of the park in the first and third acts. The middle is kind of iffy, we'll talk about that in the negatives, but everything on the outside was really good, and I did love how they were always leaving breadcrumbs to get me intrigued in not just this movie, but for its sequel. Now, sometimes it can be a little too obvious that, oh, they're definitely building towards something new, this feels unresolved. But for the most part, there were some nice bow ends on these story points that they introduced in the beginning, and then when you get to the end, you're thinking, okay, I'm curious for the next one, but I do feel satisfied with this entry into the franchise. And I think it goes without saying, but this franchise would be nothing without the excellent acting in motion capture and of course the VFX team who brings this world to life. The scale in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the absolute largest of any of this new franchise. Actually, it's probably the biggest of any Planet of the Apes film in history. It's so cool to see how, of course, 3 centuries after Caesar's reign, what Earth looks like. And yes, they're still in parts of San Francisco, of course, so you can start to see some things like the Golden Gate Bridge and what it once was, but it's really interesting to see how the world has changed and what secrets still lie beneath the surface. But like I just mentioned, the mocap work here is insane. The acting is aces, but I do have some standouts. Owen Teague plays Noah, this brand new ape that we of course are following and at times seeing the film through his eyes. He's got so much affinity for his family, his eagle clan. There are a bunch of apes that of course train these eagles, and it's actually really dope, and it's a really cool addition. I was on board with it from the moment I saw the first promo image, and I'm thinking, eagles and apes, this is really cool. But the way that they introduce us into his clan and to him as a character is really effective. I loved his origin story. I really was sitting with this movie a little bit longer and thought, he's given me like Luke Skywalker vibes to a degree, and I actually really enjoyed that. There are instances though, of course, where he makes mistakes, and I appreciate the faults in his character because it makes him a solid, well-rounded protagonist for this story. It's also really cool to see the time that he spends with his friends Anania and Suna. It's sincere, and it shows that he is a capable leader. They look to him, and I won't say much more than that, but they definitely look to him as the leader type, and it made me think, boy, this guy is most likely being propped up to be the next Caesar. I mean, he even resembles him to a degree, so that's what I believe they're hinting towards. But yes, Noah was a great character, and it was well acted by Owen Teague. And then there's my favorite character in this movie, and he is largely a supporting role, but Peter Macon, who plays Rocca, someone who is of course in the same family as the orangutan Maurice, and that's all I'm gonna say. But Peter Macon, man, he did such a great job, and his voice work is so good in this movie. You're just intrigued. Everything that he says, every little syllable, every vowel, every explanation, you are just hanging on the edge of your seat because it's almost as if he's taking control. His screen presence is palpable, and to me, I think this is a character that has got legs, and I don't mean that, you know, jokingly, but this is a character that's going to be the favorite for so many audiences. And then there's of course the human characters in this movie. We don't get many of them, and I'm going to be completely honest, it's actually pretty cool that we have little human involvement. Okay, let me hold my tongue. Yes, for the most part we have little human involvement. So May, who is played by Freya Allan, she's more of a newcomer, I believe, in Hollywood. Her filmography isn't extensive, but she's been in some TV and film. But here, this is a role that I'm so sure is going to propel her, and I hope we see more of her, because I loved how May as a character was vulnerable, yet really strong. Even though I can see some of the story elements surrounding this character be make or break for audiences, I actually really loved how intriguing her character was. There's a bit of a mystery surrounding her, and there's a lot to love, especially when you get to that third act and they tie everything together. There's a great deal of visual storytelling here as well, and a lot of this movie is not action oriented, but when we get to these action sequences, it feels like it's paid off, like your patience is paying off. This movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, but the pacing is not the worst in the world. It's not the greatest in the world. Of course, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but for the most part, when you get to these action sequences, it feels like, yeah, I am rewarded, because the action moments in this movie are incredible. It's very well directed, and I do think that the cinematography is allowing the audience to understand two things. One, this is a brand new world and it's huge, and two, you can follow the action, so you can almost feel the storytelling within those moments. I love how Noah, even though he's not an experienced fighter yet, he's able to get by, and there's little intricacies, things you notice on first watch that just make it more and more enjoyable. There's even this sort of underwater fighting sequence where Noah is fighting off of one of the apes on the other side of the fence, on Proximus' side. And yo, let me tell y'all something. That is some of the best VFX work that I've seen in a long time. I liked it more than Way of Water. And I know everyone's like, Way of Water, it's like setting a new industry standard. It's great, don't get me wrong. But the VFX work here, the way they're able to blend real world elements with this, I don't know, this motion capture that just works so seamlessly is amazing. It's just incredible to see. And my last positive takeaway here is the fact that John Paisano's score is unreal at times. He's known for his work on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 video game series Spider-Man 1, 2, and Miles Morales. And his work in those games is amazing, right? He didn't even have to go and do Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But the fact that he was scoring this movie, there were moments where I thought, who is the composer here? I cannot wait to see that in the end credits, because he is just taking this movie to another level. There are times where the film, without the score, of course, it's okay, but with the score, just elevates the movie. It's pulse pounding. I love the drums that you hear, and it's maybe not as involved as a Michael Giacchino score, because I love what Michael Giacchino did, of course, with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. But here, I like how John Paisano is able to sometimes be very subtle in the background, but rise to the occasion, no pun intended, when you get these big moments. They're character-defining moments for our protagonists and our antagonists alike. So yeah, John Paisano knocked it out of the park. Now, after all of those positives, you're probably wondering, where in the world are the elements that you didn't love? Well, you find all of those in the second act, because the middle portion of this movie magnifies the weaknesses for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I did not love the convoluted elements that were thrown into the middle of this movie. I feel the story was maybe a little too bloated for its own good. The pacing was excellent in the first and third acts. Like, the movie is coasting through, right? But it's in the second act where you start to see it arrives and it's uneven, and I didn't love it. Josh Friedman attempts to add a little too much into that second act. I don't know if I love Proximus Caesar as an antagonist. I didn't feel any which way strongly about the character. It's just, he's there, he's an antagonist. But Kevin Durand, while he did a good job with the voice work and the acting, it just felt like another villain. I didn't walk out of the theater thinking Proximus Caesar, man, what an antagonist. I didn't get that impact. There are some people, of course, that will love his performance, and it is a good performance. It's just a poorly written villain for this movie. It feels way too by the numbers, honestly. And then you have the human angle with May, and we start to learn more about the humans in this current state of affairs in the middle of the film. Sometimes the exposition gets in the way of even pacing, because it's true, like, the movie is coasting in the first act, and then you get a lot of exposition, so it drops off just a little, and then the human angle shows up, and I have a lot of questions, and there are a lot of holes in the script, or in the story rather, so I'm starting to wonder if maybe they'll explain more of this in the sequel. But for now, when you learn a little bit more about May, you start to think, is this actually going to work, or does this feel like a lot of, well, tying things together for the sake of tying things together? It doesn't necessarily feel very natural in the middle of this movie. And like I just mentioned, the pacing is definitely uneven, because there were so many times where I was intrigued, and there were moments where I caught myself yawning, and that's not great. And I know that might actually hurt the film for some audiences, because you have a very good first act, and then you get into a lot of exposition heavy scenes in the second act that could not help the movie but hurt it. And it kind of stinks that the movie does tend to dip into familiar story beats, because for the most part, this is, of course, a film that is not unlike anything we've seen before. The previous 3 movies set a new standard, right? And now we're familiar with it, so give us something new. Well, I will say, there were times where I was predicting what was coming next, and it did sort of take away from the experience. Now, are there certain things I'm sure that will surprise me in the sequel? Yes, but here in this movie, I was thinking, I don't know. No, I saw that coming. This is not anything new to me, and that does take away from the experience, sometimes a little too much. And I, again, do not think that there are characters here that are substantial, like William H. Macy's role as Trevathan. He's basically like a human servant to Proxima Caesar. That character, it could have been played by anyone else, I think, and honestly, it might not even have been worth to give them that much screen time. It just felt like there were some elements that were put on the table and kind of ignored, so I didn't love it. I thought there were some times where I'm like, all right, the momentum is dying, but then that third act hits and you're back in it again. So yeah, it's a tug and pull sort of effect, and due in large part to that second act. But overall, you guys, I want to say that Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a movie that, as I sit with it longer, I find myself more intrigued with this new trilogy. And I want to imagine that's the effect Wes Ball wanted to have on the audience. Get them excited for a brand new Apes trilogy by using this to set a new foundation in a familiar world. And hey, if that was the mission, well, it's successful, because I definitely believe that this movie has a lot to chew on, and there's some scenes that really just blew my mind in terms of the VFX and the acting. I was totally bought into the story of Noah. I really do love it, and I think that Raka is one of the better supporting characters to a protagonist in recent memory. And as much as the villain work is not great, it's at least passable to a degree, so I don't think it's a positive, but it's not necessarily enough of a negative for it to be something that sinks this movie. Now, do I think that maybe they add in too many elements into this film? Yes. And are there going to be stones that are going to be unturned in this movie that you'll still be confused by? Yes. But Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is still a solid entry into this new trilogy, and it does build on what Caesar, we miss him, it builds on what Caesar helped create and establish with this new ape, I guess, story. And it's a movie that honors the past while respecting the fact that it's got to move forward into the future. So if I had to even rate this movie, you guys, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. It's solid. It's like an 85%, because I do not think that this film is going to break any records per se, but it will do well at the box office. And I do think it sets up for what could be a really cool sequel, as long as it's done correctly. Do they bring back Wes Ball as director and Josh Friedman as writer? I don't know. Maybe not, because we didn't see that with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. We did not see Matt Reeves for all 3 films either in the previous trilogy, just for the last 2. So I'm very curious what the audience will say about this film, but how the studio will react, because if they greenlight a sequel really quickly, yeah, I think that they're not only confident in what's ahead, but we're in store for something good. So guys, there you have it. That's my real review of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, a movie I enjoyed. It's going to be a fun summer flick, and it does kick off this summer movie season in a good way. So let me know in the comments below if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, and which character was your favorite when you see it this weekend. Because guys, if it isn't Raka, what's wrong with you? No, I'm kidding. But no, seriously, we love Raka. That's the homie. Alrighty, y'all. Well, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.